What's up, guys? What's up with that? We got disconnected. Sorry, amigos. So let's do a wrap up and let's get to the mailbox and grab bag. It's been a really good show. I don't know what happened. We got disconnected. Could have been internet or something. It's happened before, but what a bummer. We had a lot of people on the line. So please try to log back on, tune back in if you can. But anyway, let's go to the grab bag, the mailbox. I don't have a good name for the segment yet. So what was the first question? First question was, okay, I had a family from India who I'm helping online. I believe it's from India. And the dad is working with his daughter, and he wants to know how to develop power in the serve. So he had a question about developing power in the serve. So what I tell parents, if you want to develop a really good server, here's the deal. Get an American football, like a little Nerf football, or Nerf is good, especially for young kids, a mini football, and throw that thing. Teach your kid to throw a spiral and throw it regularly, 3-4 times a week. Bring it to the tennis court and throw it there. I think throwing an American football is great for developing the shoulder and eventually developing a big serve. Play baseball. If you're in the U.S., play Little League. Or throw a baseball. Do a lot of throwing. Basically, the best way, if you want to have a great server down the road, when the kid is older, get them involved with throwing and throwing sports. It doesn't have to be part of an organized team, right? You just need to throw a lot and develop the shoulder musculature and maybe get the technique better. But in my experience, the kids who threw a lot when they were younger always develop powerful. It's as simple as that. And kids who just played soccer when they were young usually have trouble getting the juice on the serve, right? So you see that a lot in Spain. You see a lot of the Spanish kids, they never throw. You see it in the U.S. a lot. A lot of girls never throw when they're little. And then as they get older, you got a problem. You just can't get a lot of juice on the serve. So I think it's a huge developmental mistake not to have your kids throw. They have to do a lot of overhead movements. Another thing that I recommend is using a small medicine ball. You can do a lot of overhead movements with the medicine ball. And what else? I like cable machines, and bands are very good for doing exercises you can mimic the service motion to develop power, but it's as simple as learning to throw and throwing frequently, throwing for speed, throwing for distance, and that's a great way to develop the shoulder for serving. And that's what I recommend to all my families. That's what you got to do. I don't think there's a better way to do it. It's also fun. It's fun to go out and throw the ball. It's fun to bring a little football to the tennis court or play catch with some sort of softball or to play catch with a baseball and mitt. It's a lot of fun. And you're developing a big serve. You will develop a big serve down the road. And as we know, on the pro tour today and in college, having a big serve is critical, right? The serve is such a weapon nowadays. Everyone's serving 130s, 140s, incredible power development on the serve. It's really important to lay that foundation young. In Spain, all the kids are playing soccer, and it's not a coincidence. The Spanish players are somewhat diminutive. They tend to be smaller stature. But the real reason why a lot of Spanish players don't have great serves is because they don't throw. They don't have little league there. One of the reasons we have such great servers in the U.S. is because we have baseball here, and baseball is still very popular, right? So that's my recommendation. I hope that helps. The other reason they don't build good servers in Spain, I'll give you two reasons, actually, it's very interesting. One is that they don't spend a lot of time prioritizing the serve in Spain, and I've criticized Spanish tennis many times for this. The serve is just underweighted in a lot of their practices, so they're not getting a lot of serve practice time as it is. And another reason is, and it actually comes from the Tony Nadal philosophy. Tony believes that you should not serve more than 20 balls at a time or you risk injury. Now, that type of philosophy, while well-intentioned, is extremely conservative, and I think contrary to developing a big serve. Because if you're not willing to go out and do a bunch in a row, you may not develop the shoulder with the same ultimate power producing capacity as compared to the kids who are doing a lot of serving. The kids in Spain, or too little serving. The kids in Spain are often, if they're only doing 20 serves and then resting, 20 serves and then resting, they many times are not training their shoulder enough. So it's actually, I appreciate Tony's care and concern because he's trying to prevent injury. But sometimes you can go too far in the conservative way and you're trying to prevent injury, but you're actually preventing little kids from developing a powerful serve, powerful arm. And I think that is it's a dangerous philosophy in that sense. It's very safe, but for example, you see that with Rafael. You see that with Nadal. He doesn't have the best serve, and is that because when he was younger, Tony limited his serve too much? Or was it because he just played soccer? I mean, those are factors. Those are major factors in serve development. All right, mailbox question number 2. I have a student online from England. He wants to know whether he should go with a two-hander or a one-hander on his backhand. I said, dude, stop going back and forth. Pick one and let's do this, right? Just pick one. He sent me his videos. They both look really good. And what do you think the first question I asked him was? Okay, which one feels comfortable or most comfortable to you? So it's a personal thing. Obviously, you can develop a great two-hander or a great one-hander. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Now, there are some advantages and disadvantages to the two-hander versus the one-hander. I wrote a very comprehensive article talking about the advantages and disadvantages for tennisplayer.net magazine. John Yandel's magazine was published, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I have it on my blog, prodigymaker.com. So if you're interested in reading that article, I could try to find it and I'll try to find it and link it to the show notes. But really good article on the positives and negatives of the two-hander vis-a-vis the one-hander. And anyway, to make a long story short, you got to find what feels most comfortable for you. So it's personal preference. You shouldn't have a firm bias that dictates one or the other because it depends on the person. And the other question that I asked my student from England is, what does the one-hander feel like on high balls? Because if the two-hander is better on high balls, I would definitely lean towards the two-handed backhand, because typically one-handed players, they struggle a lot with high bouncing topspin. And that's one of the most difficult things to learn and to master as a one-handed backhand player, is how to handle high balls and take them early and on the rise. So those are the first two questions that I look for. And I have a whole sort of progression that I use with young kids to develop their backhand, to determine which one is more appropriate for them. I try to experiment with the two-hander and the one-hander and see to my eye which one looks more fluid, which one looks stronger, which one looks more coordinated, and then we try to roll with that one. But I think as coaches and parents, we should be very careful not to have a firm bias, not to be fixed on one or the other, because every child is different, every player is different, and some players may be better off with a one-hander. I've had many double-handed players that I've converted to a one-hand. It's always a smaller percentage than two-handers nowadays, but I've had a good chunk of players who we've done that, and it's been very successful. At the same time, I would say the majority of my players are two-handed players, and they're super solid. They're good on the return. They're better on high balls, things like that. That's why I usually lean towards the two-hander. We did a show on this where we talked about the two-hander. We talked about the backhand. I'll try to link to the show as well. I believe it was one of our earlier podcasts, probably in the first 10. I'll have to find it for you guys, and I'll try to link it, because we did a whole show talking about the backhand and what's the future of the two-handed backhand and things like that. I definitely probably favor a two-handed backhand, but I'm always on the lookout for kids who are more natural one-handers, and there's no reason why you can't develop a successful one-handed backhand nowadays. You see fewer players on tour using a one-hander, but you still see many successful players even at the pro level with one-handers. Case in point, you saw the recent ATP finals with Team and who did Team play? Or was it the next gen final? No, it was Team versus slips my mind. But we had two one-handers in the finals of the recent ATP championships, and gosh, who was it? Team? Sorry, slips my mind. I'm sure you guys will comment and let me know. But you see many top players now still with the one-handers, and many number one players in the world have had a one-hander. So, the answer is go with what feels best for you. And if they both feel pretty good, go with the two-hander, because two-hander's more the future, I think. But one-hander can still be good. Two-handers leaning towards a little more. That's more like the modern future thing, and it has a few advantages that I like with the return. But basically, they both can be really good, and it doesn't matter if the two-hander's arguably better, because some kids will always be better off with a one-hander, and that's the way you're going to train them. All right, last question is from one of my students. Third question in the mailbox, and he actually came up to me tonight. He's like, Chris, I know you're doing your show tonight, and I need you to answer this question on the show. It's really cool. So I was like, okay, dude, what's the question? And he goes, well, I'm having a lot of trouble with my emotions. I'm getting really angry on the court. What do I do? How do I fix that? I was like, man, that's a tough question for me to answer on the podcast, on the show, but I will do my best. Okay, here we go. How do you control your emotions and keep your anger in check when you play? So here's what I recommend: the basics of some sport psychology for kids. And what my little buddy was asking me is, he was saying, do I need a psychologist, a sports psychologist? I'm not huge on that, especially for young kids. I don't like bringing out the big guns, the heavy hitters, the high-priced sports psychologists when a kid is young. I think that a child can learn basic building block sports psychology skills, mental toughness skills, and they should learn those first, and then maybe go to the heavy hitter later down the road if the kid is still struggling mightily with emotional control or other areas of psychology and sports psychology. So when the kids are young, I really don't like to go to the sports psychology. I'm sorry for all you sports psychology pros out there who are trying to sell lessons and things like that. I think that, as an aside, I will say that sports psychology is one of those industries where I think there's a lot of snake oil salesmen. There's a lot of shuck and jive. There's unfortunately a lot of bad sports psychologists out there. There's a lot of guys and girls, women and men, selling, inefficient methods. They're wasting a lot of time and charging a lot of money. So I think there is a lot of bad practices in that industry, a lot of misleading claims, and a lot of systems, quote unquote, psychology systems, methods that have very poor outcomes. They don't have good results. So I would just caution you guys, when you're looking for psychology help, working with sports psychologists, you have to be very careful whom you choose. I'm not saying they're all bad. I know some very good sports psychologists, but I just think that's a field where there's a lot of shuck and jive. There's a lot of deception, and there's a lot of if not deception, there's a lot of people who are not good at getting results. So they're good at charging money and setting up sessions, but they don't actually get good results. They're not results tested or driven. Now, that's my opinion. What I prefer that young kids do, and families who are interested in developing mental toughness, is let's get some basic building blocks done. Let's build the character the way Tony Nadal does it. Simple and efficient. Let's work on this is what I've been working on with some of my students. Let's get the first emotional response right. The posture and the body language, the first emotional response after a lost point or after a bad point. Let's work on that skill. Very, very simple. How do you behave immediately following a lost point? Should be primarily positive, should be usually positive. It can be occasional letting off steam or getting upset, but primarily positive, a positive, constructive response. We work on rituals, very basic things, very simple sports psychology. All the kids have to have good routines, and I try to work on breathing, good rhythmic breathing, diaphragmatic breathing. The diaphragm is the muscle that helps control the lungs expansion and contraction. So deep breathing, chest rising and falling, and controlled breathing, learning to manipulate your breath. I work on that with children, with kids. I think that's important. Just simple visualization can be good for lots of kids. I believe in the power of visualizing well, and positive self-coaching. These are some of the basics that I use with my students. And I don't think you need someone with a PhD to do it. You just need a parent or a coach who's involved and who can support the kid as they're working through some of these big emotions that they're feeling, and working through the anxieties and stresses of a match. So some of those basic building blocks are key. I'll be honest, I think half of my students, when they're young, and I work with a lot of young kids, they don't seem mature enough to even work on those simple things, which I think is a shame. And I would say about half of my students are willing to get into it. I think there's a big danger with sports psychology to get too much into the too hyper analytical, and that is a big danger with sports psychologists who are very technical or quantitative or have a PhD. They can get too much into the kid's brain, get them thinking too much, over-analyzing, and that can actually affect performance. So I think for that reason alone, aside from the fact that I don't believe in shelling out a ton of money for psychology lessons, especially with young kids, that when you're working on psychology, you keep it really simple. Keep it really simple so the kids aren't over analyzing things. Too much analysis can cause a loss of confidence, and what we want when players go out and compete, we want automation, we want confidence. We don't want them over analyzing. And sometimes with some of the psychology people I've studied with, I've seen their approach, and it's just they get too much involved. The kids start reflecting too much on themselves, and it can actually backfire. So you have to be really careful like that. Keep things simple, and work on these basic mental toughness skills. First emotional response after the point is over. The basic routines, visualization at different times of the match, pre-match. Manipulating your breath, very important to learn how to breathe. Obviously we breathe, but the kids are like, what do you mean, breathe? Well, manipulating your breathing so you can calm yourself when you're feeling stressed, and positive self-coaching. So many kids that I work with are hyper negative with themselves. They have a constant stream of invective that they hurl at themselves, which is really sad, and they can't escape it. They're like a constant critic. They're always demeaning themselves, devaluing themselves, they're criticizing themselves. And that judgment needs to stop for those children. And the first step is to start replacing the bad thoughts with good ones and trying to find constructive, positive coaching comments that they can give to themselves. And it sounds so simple, but those basic simple things that I mentioned are really hard for kids to learn and do repeatedly under the pressures of a match. It's like everything in a match, everything gets thrown out the window, and kids start behaving like madmen out there, or mad women out there, like lunatics. And you can't let your kid become a lunatic on the tennis court. And getting back to the initial topic of the show, parenting, I think parents have a unique insight, and if they're well bonded to their child, can have a tremendous influence on the mental side of things, and they should be involved with the mental training of their children. And in a way, you are from the very beginning, just by virtue of being a parent and raising your kid from the very beginning. You are affecting their character, and you're affecting their mental toughness as you raise them. The way you choose to raise your child is going to affect their character on the court. It's going to affect their ability to handle pressure and stress and the anxiety of playing tennis. So whether you like it or not as a parent, I think that's going to be an important job for you. And you can choose to embrace that job or not. Teaching your kid good character and teaching your kids some of the skills that they'll need under pressure. How to handle their emotions, how to be positive with themselves, how to breathe and control their nervous system, and how to develop good routines that they stick with during the ups and downs of a match. These are some basic fundamentals that as a parent you can instill in your child and start to work on at a very young age, and you can make them a better competitor that way. You can help them learn some of the traits of being a champion. There have been many parents who have not been tennis coaches. They don't have a tennis background, but they've taught their kids good character. They've taught their kids to be mentally tough. And they've taught their kids to be physically tough, to be good and athletic. And I think we've seen that time and again. The most recent example is maybe Coco Gauff comes to mind, where her dad, Corey, is not a tennis player, but he has a open mind and a growth mindset, and he's learning from all the coaches around him. He has been learning over the years, but he's very good on the mental side, supporting his daughter, Coco. And also he's an athlete who understands the physical development and staying healthy and developing a good athlete with good coordination and speed, agility, and things like that. So I think that parents who may not have an expertise in tennis, if you can learn some of the mental side, if you can learn about the physical side, keeping your kid healthy and strong and making them a better athlete, that is critical no matter what sport they're doing. But in tennis, the pressures on a young child are super high, and tennis players need a lot of support in terms of learning these sports psychology skills. But I don't think you need expensive, fancy sports psychologists with PhDs. So that's what I would recommend to my little buddy. I would say, let's start with the basics. Show me that you can start working on the first emotional response. You can start working on actually controlling your breathing when it counts, and you take that seriously. Show me you're working on positive self-coaching. Show me that your routines are solid when you play. You have good, healthy rituals and routines. And show me that you're visualizing success, visualizing positive results, and visualizing good patterns and good technique and things like that, positive outcomes. And if you start getting those building blocks in place, I bet you the emotions, the anger that you're feeling it may not go away completely, but it will be easier to manage, and that's the goal. The goal is not to eliminate anger completely, but to channel the anger into something constructive, or to mitigate the anger to mitigate it enough so that it doesn't distract you from your game plan and from defeating your rival. So that's what I would say. Guys, it was a really awesome show. That's all the mail that we have tonight. Remember that you can always send in your mail questions to me. Chris@chrislewitt.com is my email. You can send me any questions that you'd like me to answer on the next program, and I will dutifully answer them live. Also, guys, please, if you like the show, give me a thumbs up. Please share the show with friends. Please share the show with groups that you think may be interested in the content here. Did I say content? I don't like that word. Share it with friends who are interested in high-performance junior tennis. Share it with friends who are coaches or parents or tennis players. We are a serious tennis show dealing with the high-performance junior world. And so those are the audience members we're looking for, people that are interested in junior development, whether they're parents, players, or coaches. And I don't think there's many shows focusing on that niche. And I know you guys are my hardcore audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening and watching. I really appreciate you guys. The show is steadily growing, and I appreciate people who are willing to put up with some of the lack of polish on the show, and are willing to stay with me and share in the discussion, but also for even the people who are just listening in. And I know that if you're listening carefully, you're picking up good information that you can use on the court or with your players. I appreciate you guys so much. Thanks again. Have a great night, and God bless.